Hi there, this is Mark Killian. Welcome to Mark Killian's channel where we're always learning. And this is part 2 of Jazz Harmony Primer. In this episode, we're going to deal with progressions. In the first episode, we looked at how chords are made. How are they built? How does all the harmony surrounding that work together to make chords? Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to concentrate on how all those chords get strung together to make progressions, which is the very heart of how music is actually made. And one good way to start understanding this is to look at the circular fifths. Could also be called the circular fourths. So take a look here. Basically, this is a template. You'll see right at the top there. And if you go one to the right, you're going up a fifth. From C to G is a fifth. That's 7 semitones. And then going from G to D is another fifth. And so on. A, E. These are all fifths apart. And all the way 12 times later, you get back to C. And so it's the 12th step program for music. And likewise, if you go left from C, you're going to F, which is up a fourth. And then from F to B flat going left, and B flat to E flat, and blah, 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 you're going up a fourth every time until you get back to C. Or you can invert that and say, okay, going from C to G going right again, but now going down, not up. From C down to G is down a fourth. And similarly, G down to D is a fourth. And all of that happens correctly until you get back to C. And again, if you go left but also go down, now you're going down a fifth. From C to F is down a fifth. From F to B flat is down a fifth. And blah, blah, blah until you get back to C. So it all works together very well. Now, how this wheel helps us is by determining relationships. And so in a very geographical sense on this chart, what's closer is going to be more relatable musically. So if you look down from C, you will see an A, green A, and it's in a small letter, not a capital. That is denoting a minor chord. And that is the relative minor of C. C's relative minor is A. Here's C. Here's A. A minor. Let's go to G. Here's G. And we'll go to E minor. Very pleasing relationship between those two notes. And each major chord, A, for example, has its relative minor, which is F sharp. And the relative minor is always 3 semitones lower. So, for example, here's in C. A sound you'll all be familiar with. That's going down in thirds. Now, there are entire episodes on YouTube talking specifically about the circular fifths and going into a lot of detail about it. Suffice to say, for our purposes, geographically speaking, the closer two things are on this chart, the more those notes are relatable. So if you go from C down to the bottom to F sharp, here's C. That's out. That's out there. C to B. Not so much. Here's C to G. Much more appealing. So let's put that away because this is not something we're going to keep on referring to, but it is helpful to keep in mind as just a general roadmap. Now, as I always say, the whole point of learning all this stuff, all these rules, is so that you can break them. And that's what music is about. The cool stuff that happens in music is when you do the things that the rules say you shouldn't do. But in order to do that in a pleasing way, it helps to understand the rules first. Okay, so just a quick word about notation. There are two different ways of doing this. One is chord symbols, as you're probably all familiar with: C, G, D7, A flat major, 9, whatever. And the other way is Roman numerals. Now this comes from the classical world, but we're going to be using that in this case because it's Roman numerals give you context. So you'll find Roman numerals that are capitalized, and that denotes a major chord. And when they're small or minimized, it's minor. And if we're in C, all the Roman numerals will be relative to C. So if you see a 5 or a 6, you know that's 5 or 6 of C. But we can just as easily on this circle of fifths, jump to any key we want, and then the Roman numerals will refer to the new key that we've just jumped into, and that's called a transposition. Now, a chord is just a chord on its own, but string two chords together and more, and suddenly you have a relationship. And much like human beings, that relationship is going to be full of tension and resolution, and the limitations of both and the interactions between both. And what chord goes with what chord is all determined by the structure of what we're going to look at now. So let's start out by looking at, we're going to keep everything in C today. It just makes it easy to understand everything relatively. So if we take the C scale, this is 1. Chord 1 is your C major chord. 2 will be this, which will be D minor. 3 will be E minor. 4 will be F major. 5 will be G major. 6 will be A minor. And 7 will be B half diminished. Forget 7, we're not going to use that much. But for more detailed explanation on the stuff, as always, go back and refer to my first video on this to understand the chords themselves. Now, there are a million types of chord sequences. I'm just going to look today at some of the more basic ones that you might recognize from songs or from pieces. And so we're going to start with 1, 4, 5. Here's 1, here's 4, here's 5. So for example, you will be very familiar with that. There's also a Bob Marley song. So all I'm doing there is fleshing it out a bit, putting some passing tones in there to get me from one to another. But it's 1, 4, 5. Now, the next, probably most widely used is the 2, 5, 1. But I'm going to leave that for later because that has a whole different ball game that comes with it. So let's move on to 1, 6, 4, 5. So, for example, Blue Moon. You'll be very familiar with that from the 50s and 60s. It really has that sort of... And this leads us to another progression, which is 1, 6, 2, 5. Now what's different there is only the 4 has been substituted for the 2. It works almost the same way. And what is happening there is it's called a substitution. Now this is where your circle of fifths chart will come in handy because you can refer to that for possible substitutions. For example, chord 4, which is F, its relative minor, if you look at F here, is D minor. So instead of playing chord 4, we'll play chord 2. So... And that is something very common we're going to see again and again, is substituting one chord for another. Now we'll come to 1, 5, 6, 4. 1, 5, 6, 4. So for example, another song you'll know well. or now you might say, hey, that wasn't 1, 5, 6, 4. Well, it was, but I substituted. Look at this. And substitutions are not only possible with other chords, substitutions are also possible with inversions of chords. So, for example, here's 1, here's 5, but you can also play 5 in the first inversion, meaning your bass is going to be the second note of the chord, not the first note of the chord. And so in this case, going from C down to A minor, I can go through 5 as a passing, so it functions like a passing tone, but it's really chord 5, it's just you using it in inversion. And the same comes to an, now that is actually a C chord, but I'm playing it in second inversion, so the bass is going to have the second note of the chord. And so again, we're substituting, but this time we're substituting with inversions, different ways of structuring that chord. Now to the 6, 4, 1, 5. You don't always have to start on 1. In this case, we're starting on 6. Or the chorus to Toto's Africa. And then we have 1, 4, 6, 5. So again, you can substitute 2 for the 4, or you can substitute a 4 for the 6, or this one. And then there is 1, 5, 2, 5 again. The chorus of I Want to Know What Love Is, for example. Or you might play it like this. And all I'm doing there is adding passing tones again. And now we come to the ubiquitous 2-5-1 when it comes to jazz. And of course I'm not including all jazz. A lot of jazz branched off into different harmonic territory, but 2-5-1 is really probably the first thing you're going to learn if you take a jazz course at a jazz school. And here is a 2-5-1. Now, in and of itself, it's not the most amazing progression in the world. But what is important about 2-5-1 is that it is a transport mechanism. It is a way of getting you from point A to point B. And by the way, it's not like this was started with jazz. This is possibly one of the most common progressions, or at least devices in terms of progressions used to get from point A to point B. If you're modulating to another key, 2-5-1 is usually how you're going to get there, even in classical music. So let's say now I want to modulate from C to B flat, for example. Okay, here I am in C. Having fun. Now watch this. What did I do there? We were in C. And then I switched my key to B flat. But I started out by doing a 2-5-1 in B flat. Now what's 2 in B flat? 2 is the C minor. And what is chord 5 in B flat? It's the F major, or the F dominant. So what it means is you can go from C, like we were in, and that got me to B flat in a really cool way. Now I'm in B flat. Now let's say I want to go to A flat. I'm going to do the same thing. 2 of A flat is B flat minor. So I'll switch from B flat major chord to B flat minor chord. It is a wonderful device, and you can get to all sorts of crazy keys by using this technique. Let's take a jazz standard to illustrate this. How high the moon. Let's do it in C. So that is a good example of how jazz will frequently move through a gazillion keys in one piece without you really noticing it, because it leads you from one corner to another in a satisfying way. Sometimes there's more tension, sometimes there's less tension. It all just depends on where you're going with it. So here is another way of doing chord progressions that I call creeping harmonic movement, that is very much used in Bossa Nova, for example. What I'm doing there, this is called one note samba for a reason. There's one note at the top, and we're starting on D minor, then we're going to C sharp 7. Now what is the relationship between those two notes and those two chords? It's not as close as some of the progressions we've looked at. The relationship is a little more strained. What makes it work is that your bass keeps going down. Or for example, those notes are not always as close on this chart and as related, as closely related, but what makes them work is they share a bass line going down and they share a pretty simple melody. So that is a device used a lot in Bossa Nova and other things. Now, the other progression we need to mention is the blues. I looked at this a little bit in the last episode, but there are different types of blues. There's major blues, there's minor blues, there's 12-bar blues, there's 16-bar blues, and other weird things too. But basically, just the simple 12-bar blues in major would be something like this. Now what's happening there is we're just going from 1 to 4 and then back to 1 and then to 4 again and then back to 1 and then back to 5. But all of them are dominant chords, and that's what makes the blues special. C dominant, F dominant, and then G dominant. So and so on. You can go and study blues in depth if you want to, and I highly suggest you do. But the purpose of me illustrating this is because if you look at the basic structure of blues, you're going to go in there and substitute all over the place, and that's what makes it interesting. That's how you do stuff like this. Now that's the blues, but I'm substituting all sorts of things all over the place there, using chords to lead in to where you're going. If you go from 1 to 4, there's a million ways of getting to 4. You don't just have to go straight there. You can go. Now this is a good time to mention something I did mention in the last episode, but it's voicings of how you voice chords. Now the reason I'm mentioning it here is because these help you to get from one chord to another. So we're going to look at something called shell voicings, very commonly used in the blues. We're in C, and if you want to look at the detail of this, go and look at the other episode, but here's a shell voicing. And then when you go to F, very little movement between those two. You've got obviously your tonic here, you've got your third there, your dominant seventh there, and then your ninth here. Now when you move to F, you've got your tonic there, here's your dominant seventh, and here is your third, and here is your sixth or your 13th. And so between those two, you're only moving those two notes, and so that makes it just work better than going. You know, much better do this. And similarly, there's this shell chord here. So there's your tonic, here's your dominant seventh, and then your third, and then your 13th. And then when you get to F, here's your third, your dominant seventh, and your ninth. Just flipping around what I was doing earlier. Now these voicings are built on both a structure of thirds apart and a structure of fourths apart. Now the fourths is called chordal harmony and is very important in the next thing we're going to talk about, which is static harmony. And this became a very popular sound with the cool jazz and the West Coast jazz that became popular in the 60s. You know, the Miles Davises and the Dave Brubecks and the Stan Getzes of the world. What are we doing here? Now that's the song. It goes from D minor, and then it plays the same thing in E flat minor, and then goes back down to D minor. There is really no progression here. So this kind of harmony, what we call static harmony, doesn't seek to go from point A to point B through a series of doors or a series of devices like a 251 or a 1645 or whatever. It just goes straight there and says, oh, what do you think of that? It's static. And so in this case, we've got a fairly simple bass line and a really wonderfully simple melody that is voiced in the horns, and the piano is playing some beautiful sounding quartal harmonies, and then when they transpose, when they move that to E flat minor, they just do it. There's no setup. And in this case, again, we are using quartal harmonies and shell chords, but this time it's much more built upon quartal harmony. So in your D minor, you've got your 1, your root, you've got your 11, you've got your dominant 7th, you've got your minor 3rd, and you've got your 5th. And this is not going anywhere. This is not a 251. This is not getting you to a point. This is just moving up and down in parallel motion on top of a pedal point or a key or something that just stays on D. It's wonderful stuff and really is a different sound than the type of jazz we've been accustomed to up until that point. So there's a lot to digest here, but I think the takeaway from all of this is that music is an expression. It's like a language. And here are the rules. Now please go and break them. Make it your own. Make it a form of expression. Understanding how all this stuff works together, how they're all structured, is what frees you and enables you to do anything you want to express whatever it is you want to express at that moment. If you want to walk out to the pool, you can walk out that door, you can use that door, you can use that door, or you can walk out the front and then walk around the back. You're getting to the pool, but the way you get there is your expression. It's how you want to express your humanity in your existence. And these are the tools in musical terms that we use to do that. Please like and subscribe. It really helps me grow my channel. And if you like this, please tell your friends about it. Please tell people who are looking to learn music about this channel. I would really appreciate it. And I will catch you on the next one. Don't ever stop learning.